starting off in the U.S., where delegates at the Republican National Convention have praised Mr. Trump. Patrons at the Kaiser Pub in San Francisco are not psyched up about Mr. Trump's speech at his convention speech at the party's national convention. Some share their views after he formally accepted the Republican presidential nomination.
Yeah, I think there's a general sort of sense of resignation to a resignation of surprise around how his message continues to resonate with a broad swath of the country, and just a little bit of disillusionment on how that continues to be a compelling message. But I think it also shows the fact that there's a bunch of stuff wrong with the country that clearly both sides of the aisle haven't figured out how to fix.
Now, Trump does represent the majority of the population in America, and do I want him back in there? It's a yes and no, right? Because he's a little offish, little topic. If he just doesn't talk as much, he would be a fantastic president. But unfortunately, he doesn't have the mindset that he just keeps speaking. Now he has a lot of intelligent people that work for him, and that's great, which will help us out. But on the same token, he will try to bring back some of the things that we need to, a little more glue that's needed right now. Right now, there's a lot of trophy giving. Oh, you have a trophy for this, you have a trophy for that. And maybe we'll be able to get somebody in there who's going to say, hey, let's really look at what is on the left side and the right side and come to a median understanding. You know, he has brought a lot of good things. So before, my shirt said they both suck. That was my shirt. On one side, we have somebody who's just let go of everything. And on the other side, now we have somebody who's coming back and maybe finishing up what he started.
In the meantime, people in the nation's capital have also been expressing their thoughts on J.D. Vance following his speech at the Republican National Convention on Wednesday. Some Washington, D.C. residents say they were surprised he was chosen as a Republican vice presidential candidate. Mr. Vance's prime-time debut less than 2 years after assuming his first public office capped a meteoric rise that coincided with his transformation from a fierce Trump detractor to one of his most devoted defenders. He is one of several high-profile Republicans, such as U.S. Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, whose reversals from critics to loyalists underscore Mr. Trump's takeover of the party.
I officially accept your nomination to be Vice President of the United States of America.
Well, away from the Republican National Convention to the Democrats' campaign event in North Carolina, where U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris slammed former President Donald Trump and his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, saying their 2025 project is extreme and divisive. Ms. Harris attended the campaign rally in Fayetteville, North Carolina, as President Joe Biden isolates himself after testing positive for COVID-19 on Wednesday. This is her 15th trip to North Carolina since she took office in 2020.
We are 110 days out from the election. And while many of us have been involved with these elections for every 4 years practically, nearly every time we will say, this is the one. Well, this here is the one. The most existential, consequential, and important election of our lifetime. And there is so much at stake. So some of you may have heard Donald Trump's running mate deliver remarks at the Republican National Convention. He talked about his life story about growing up in Southwest Ohio, and it was compelling. It's a compelling story. And it was not the full story. Frankly, what is very telling is what he did not talk about on that stage. He did not talk about Project 2025, their 900-page blueprint for a second Trump term. He did not talk about it because their plans are extreme and they are divisive. You cannot claim you stand for unity if you are intent on taking reproductive freedoms from the people of America and the women of America. You cannot claim to be for unity if you try to overturn a free and fair election and threaten to terminate the United States Constitution.
Well, staying with U.S. politics, President Joe Biden's re-election bid faces fresh turmoil after reports that top Democratic leaders had privately pushed the 81-year-old incumbent to end his campaign. According to U.S. media, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, House Majority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have all expressed deep concerns directly to Mr. Biden in recent days that he will not only lose the White House, but also cost the party any chance of winning back the U.S. House of Representatives in the November 5 election. U.S. pundits reacting to this say that the fact that these calls for Mr. Biden to step down are public probably means the Democratic leaders have been unable to convince him in private. Here's Dan Mallison, a public policy professor at the Pennsylvania State University.
I think that's a big deal, especially for someone like Nancy Pelosi, to have her conversation come out in the news, even though it didn't come directly from her. She's very much somebody who likes to do things sort of quietly and in the background and then have a very unified front. She was always that way as Speaker of the House. So, probably rightfully so, people have been reading into the fact that this is public as, she maybe didn't get as far as she wanted with the president in that conversation, and now there's greater public pressure. I think the recent polling was something like 3/4 of polled Democrats would like to see Biden step down. But what that doesn't get at is, well, if Biden stays in the race, are those Democrats really are they going to stay home? Are they going to vote for former President Trump? Probably not, right? So the bigger concern is that it's going to be a drag on turnout for the Democrats. Then you have the potential of sort of this free-for-all. Then that would be very damaging, I would think, and would be damaging to whoever emerged, right? Like if there was this big fight and Kamala still emerged, then that's going to undermine her. If there's this big fight and it's somebody else, like Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer or somebody like that emerges that's been talked about, I mean, again, I don't know how they consolidate the party. So everybody's concerned about Biden losing them the election, but the alternative of him stepping aside and then picking somebody else is not straightforward and has a lot of, can be quite fraught. Right?
And we return to the Republicans' camp. Delegates at the party's convention have been reacting to the end of the 4-day conference, saying they are delighted with what they heard from Mr. Donald Trump. Many praised the presidential candidate, calling him a changed man, and the Republican Party unified now more than ever.
I've been to 6 national conventions. I've never seen a more unified Republican Party. We're on to victory. Whoever Biden, Harris, whoever they put up, at the election of today, tomorrow, next week, we're going to win in 4 months, and it's going to be one hell of a landslide.
I thought he did fantastic. He was subdued. He told what happened on Saturday, and then he came back to his old self to really promote America and to say what he was going to do for us as president to make America great once again.
That is a changed man. That is a Trump 2.0. I have been to Trump rallies since 2016. That's a man committed, and that's a changed man. And this is a unified party. There's no stopping us. There is no stopping it.
Well, a memorial service has been held for the volunteer firefighter chief who was killed during the attempted assassination of former U.S. President Donald Trump. Friends and family lined up outside the Hall in Freeport, Pennsylvania, to pay tribute to the man who shielded his wife and daughter from the bullets. His colleagues and those who attended spoke after the ceremony. Bring you those tracks in a moment. Let's move on to some other news. Let's move on to some other news as we now take. We'll stay with U.S. Politics, and I now understand that we can now go to our discussion on the matter. VOA correspondent Carol Van Dam is joining us now to talk about everything we've been talking about today, the all-important politics in the United States, and of course those elections coming up in November. Pleasure having you on the program.
Thanks, it's nice to be here.
Right, so the Republican convention has come and gone, but all that happened for the past 4 days is still garnering lots and lots of reactions. How are Americans reacting to the GOP candidate's speech? He did touch on a lot of things.
Well, if you talk to Americans that were in that convention hall last night, right across the street from where we are, you will hear that it was a wonderful speech and it was very impressive and even emotional. He started out the speech by saying that he was not running for president for half the country. He was running for the entire country, kind of setting that tone that he was putting the divisiveness beside him. But you could tell that he was veering off message and he was starting to ad-lib a good half hour into the program, into the speech. He spent right after that, he spent the first 15 minutes talking about that horrible day, Saturday, at the Pennsylvania rally where he was shot at, an attempted assassin who was killed by a Secret Service sharpshooter. But, you know, it injured his right ear, and he said to the crowd that it was so painful for him that he was only going to tell it once, and he was telling it last night to them. And he almost went into this quasi-religious kind of talk about how he felt that it was by the grace of Almighty God that he wasn't killed, and said that it came within a quarter of an inch of taking his life. He said, I was not supposed to be here, to which the crowd immediately started chanting all together, yes, you are, yes, you are. So it was quite a night. But then he went into more about some of his previous kind of stump speeches from years past, just going more into that negative territory, blaming the current administration for too many illegal aliens and saying it was damaging the country, that it was really hurting the country, and that tens of thousands of illegal aliens continue to get into this country, and that wouldn't happen on his watch.
And dissecting Mr. Trump's speech further, we saw a sort of sober reflection, as you mentioned there, on Saturday's shooting that could have taken his life, mentioning his rival's name only once, unlike many other speeches we've heard from Mr. Trump. What more takeaways could we get from his speech?
He talked about, like I said, immigration. He also, talked about foreign policy and, said that China was getting away with too much and that he was going to raise tariffs. It's still up in the air how much it would raise tariffs, but he said inflation was out of control. And what economists have pointed out is if you raise tariffs on imported goods, especially, from China where America gets lots of its goods, by up to 60%, as he has suggested, that is going to hurt the economy. And that it trickles down to the consumers, because whatever the companies have imposed on them, they will pass that on to the consumer. So it's actually not going to be good for an ordinary American. He talked about kind of like his resentments that can't have come bubbling up again, like he had from the past, calling it a witch hunt. What the Justice Department was doing to him with his convictions, his felony convictions, and that they should not waste their time on that anymore and work to strengthen America, that kind of talk.
And now the party seems, more united and unified more than ever. We've heard delegates say this and how proud they are of the party now that nominations have been accepted. What's the next for the party as we head towards November's election?
Well, like you say, this incident in Pennsylvania has united the party like nothing else could. I mean, not everybody was on board inside the Republican Party before that happened. It is almost, I would say, 100% unified behind him right now. as far as the disparate Republicans who were more moderate, or even some conservative Republicans that were not fully on board with him when it comes to abortion, which, by the way, he did not even mention in that over 90-minute speech last night. So now what happens is they go full throttle. He and his presidential running mate, who was announced here, of course, earlier in the week, J.D. Vance, the Ohio senator, freshman Ohio senator, and they're going to hit the ground running. Their first event is a rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan this weekend.
And let's talk about, what the president himself, that's President Biden. What's the update on him this time concerning his health?
Well, as you know, he has been tested positive for COVID, and he has been trying to recuperate at his summer home in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. His advisors are still sticking to the speech that he is still running for president, but more and more Democratic leaders have come to him privately and have said the polls indicate you just can't do it at this point. You just can't win the election in November. So we're hearing that his advisors are at least that Biden is coming around to the idea, the notion that he may have to step down, but that has not happened. Some of the people in the Democratic Party and Democratic leaders think that it may happen within the next few days, but that's not certain.
And what does this say about the preparedness of the Democrats ahead of November's elections?
Well, the most likely candidate would be his vice president, Kamala Harris. She's the traditional person who would step into that position if something like this were to happen. Of course, this particular circumstance has never happened before in this timeline, so close to an election. But the bets are on that it would be Kamala Harris. But of course, there's other candidates. There's a handful of Democratic governors that have been spoken about. There's also Pete Buttigieg, his transportation secretary, who ran against Joe Biden in the primary. There's all kinds of people that could happen, but the bets are on Kamala Harris if that should come to be.
Right. And when is the Democrats' convention going to take place?
I'm sorry?
The Democrats' convention.
Yes, that's coming up in August in Chicago, and, it remains to be seen what's going to happen there. We might see, a renewed vitality of the Democratic Party, and they may be just as unified as the Republicans. We just don't know. Everybody gets energized at a convention, and the Democrats have their chance to do that as well. So we'll see what happens. There were a few demonstrations outside here, but they were not very large, and they weren't very, outspoken or loud. So you could see more of that in Chicago, but we don't know.
Right. Carol, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Britain's new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has hailed European unity, saying deeper defense and security cooperation would better support Ukraine, while shared intelligence could help tackle illegal migration. Closing a meeting of the European political community of more than 40 nations at the Blenheim Palace, the birthplace of Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister said stronger relationships had been developed at the summit, the first step in his efforts to reset post-Brexit ties with the European Union. His push for closer cooperation takes place against the backdrop of the possible election of Donald Trump, who, alongside his pick for White House running mate J.D. Vance, has suggested cutting U.S. support for Ukraine, leaving Europe to cover the loss. In the meantime, newly re-elected European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the most important topic for the European Union is defending its democracy. Ms. von der Leyen, who is back for a second five-year term, says the EU's democracy is under attack from inside and from outside. She's expected to now assemble her team, known as the College. This 27-member group includes a commissioner from each EU country proposed by the national government. Recent EU commissioners include former lawmakers, diplomats, government ministers, and business executives. National governments are expected to put forward their candidates by early August.
As well as her clear support for the Parliament's right to initiative. We are working all together for a strong Europe. We're working on the topics of prosperity and competitiveness in our economy, social fairness because we have a social market economy. We're working on protecting people, so security and defense, but the most important is the overarching topic of strengthening our democracy. Our democracy is under attack from inside and from outside, and therefore it is crucial that the democratic forces stand together to defend our democracy. 401 votes in favor. You recall last time it was 8 votes above the majority, necessary majority. This time it's 41, so much better. And this sends a strong message of confidence, and I think it's also recognition for the hard work that we carried out together in the last 5 years within the last mandate. I'm very grateful, of course, to the platform, EPP, Renew and SD, but I'm also very grateful to the Green Group to have supported me. We had intensive exchanges on all the topics, and it's a good sign that at the very end, obviously, they were convinced to support me. But the most important, and I want to pick the best prepared candidates who share the European commitment. Once again, I will aim for an equal share of men and women at the college table. 2035 climate neutrality target for cars. That target stays. And we have to create predictability for investors and manufacturers and, of course, customers. Getting there will require indeed a technology-neutral approach in which e-fuels have to play a role.
U.S. journalist Ivan Gershkovich has been found guilty of espionage by a Russian court and sentenced to 16 years in a high-security penal colony after a secret trial decried as a sham by his employer. The Wall Street Journal reporter was first arrested last March while on a reporting trip in the city of Yekaterinburg, about 1,600 kilometers east of Moscow, by security services. Prosecutors accused him of working for the Central Intelligence Agency, accusations that Mr. Gershkovich, the WSJ and the U.S. vehemently deny. It marks the first conviction of a U.S. journalist for espionage in Russia since the Cold War ended more than 30 years ago. Well, ties between North Korea and Russia appear to be deepening as Russia's Vice Minister of Defense, Alexei Krivorushko, meets with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang, according to the North Korean media KCNA news agency. Both men discussed the importance of the two countries' militaries to unite more firmly to defend world peace and justice. They also shared the need for military cooperation between the two countries to defend mutual security interests. North Korea and Russia have tightened military cooperation since their leaders held a summit in the Russian Far East last year and signed a treaty on strategic partnership that includes a mutual defense agreement struck in June when Mr. Putin visited Pyongyang. Well, a massive technology outage has disrupted businesses and institutions in multiple countries, throwing airports, airlines, rail services, and government services, banks, stock exchanges, supermarkets, telecoms, health systems, and media outlets into chaos. The cause of the outage related to global cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike is not immediately clear, but it came hours after Microsoft said it was addressing an issue affecting access to Microsoft's 365 apps and services. Thousands of air passengers are currently stranded across the world.
There were approximately 110,000 commercial flights scheduled across the world on Friday, but over 1,300 have had to be cancelled, leaving passengers stranded. At Sydney Airport, information screens showed the Microsoft Blue error screen, known informally as the blue screen of death, for a few hours before coming back online. The outage caused chaos as flights were cancelled and information screens went out of order.
It was very chaotic. So whoever arrived here, they had no idea what's going on. I mean, this is the first time I experienced something like this. So I saw everyone checking with staff member, what's going on, what's the next move.
Our flight's been cancelled, so now we're trying to find accommodation in Sydney, which is not easy. Our daughters are trying to do that online, and then we'll have to try and get a flight home somehow, somewhere, sometime, don't know.
Blue error screens also filled Los Angeles International Airport and Seattle Tacoma International Airport as flights were grounded. Travelers waited in long queues, snaking through the check-in area of Paris Orly Airport on Friday, as a global cyber outage interrupted operations of several industries and companies around the world. At the Orly Airport, some passengers saw their flights delayed by at least 1 hour. Travelers were also stranded at airports across India amid the delays caused by a global cyber outage affecting various airlines. Many airlines, including SpiceJet, Indigo, Akasa Air, Vistara, Air India, and Air India Express, posted messages on X saying they were facing issues.
The issues in the airport is, I think, the DigiYatra is not working. A lot of us have gotten so used to the seamless, contactless transition into the airport. I see long queues now. I think it's going to take me at least 45 minutes, 1 hour to get into the airport. I don't know how long the security is going to take. And right now, I'm not even sure of the impact on the timings of the flight as well.
Passengers at Lisbon Airport faced delays and cancellations, but ANA Aeroportos do Portugal said in a news release that the IT system in Portugal airports had not been affected. The global tech outage disrupted operations across multiple industries, with some broadcasters off air and services from banking to healthcare hit by system problems. The global tech outage appeared to be related to issues at global cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike and Microsoft. According to the CEO, George Kurtz, CrowdStrike is actively working with customers impacted by a defect found in a single content update for Microsoft Windows hosts. He says the issue has been identified, isolated, and a fix has been deployed. He also confirmed that the problem is not a security breach or a cyber attack.
Well, security forces are patrolling quieter than usual streets in the Bangladeshi capital Dhaka as several businesses remain shut amid fresh protests against quotas for government jobs. 3 people died during Friday's protest as telecoms links were widely disrupted and television news channels went off the air. Authorities had cut some mobile telephone users and services the previous day to try to quell the unrest initially sparked by student anger against the controversial quotas, but Friday's wider disruption was not linked to a global cyber outage. The new protest defied government's order barring all public meetings and processions indefinitely after nearly 2,000 people were killed in the violence this week. An Israeli man is said to have been killed and at least 8 people injured in a drone attack in central Tel Aviv, Israel. A block of flats was hit by what an Israeli military official said was an Iranian-made unmanned aerial vehicle which had been modified to fly long distance. The Houthi movement in Yemen, over 1,000 miles away, said it carried out the attack and vowed to stage more. Israeli military says an initial investigation points to the attack having originated in Yemen. If the Houthis are responsible, it would mark a significant escalation in their attacks on Israel, which began in the wake of Israel's military campaign in Gaza, which was triggered by the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7. Until now, almost all Houthi Missiles and drones fired towards Israel have been intercepted. None are known to have reached Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, residents recount the moments the drone blast rocked Tel Aviv. The unmanned aircraft did not trigger air raid alarms, and residents say that they were woken up by a loud noise. Affected homes had their windows blown out and cars were damaged in surrounding streets where the U.S. Embassy is located.
Early this morning, emergency personnel, police hotline number 100, received a report of an explosion that took place here in the heart of Tel Aviv on the street Shalom Aleichem in a building that's right behind me. Emergency personnel rushed to the scene, including bomb disposal experts who are still working at the scene to investigate what exactly took place. We're talking about a number of individuals who were harmed by this explosion. At this time, we also have reports of one fatality. This country right now is in a state of war, but we are not going to allow terror to dictate our lives. Our police forces, together with emergency personnel, MADA, all the emergency personnel are working together to ensure the safety of our civilians.
Britain's new Labour government says it will resume funding to the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA, and called on Israel to allow more aid to enter Gaza. Britain was one of the several countries to halt their funding to the UN Relief and Works Agency following accusations by Israel that some agency staff were involved in the October 7 Hamas attack on Israel that triggered the Gaza war. British Foreign Minister David Lammy told Parliament he was reassured that the agency, which provides education, health and aid to millions of Palestinians, had taken steps to ensure it meets the highest standards of neutrality, and the government will now provide £21 million in new funding. Other countries, including Japan, Germany, Italy, Australia and Canada, have resumed funding to the agency. And here in Lagos, Nigeria, 33 Nigerian scholars are close to fulfilling their educational dreams as they graduate from the Education USA Opportunity Funds program. The Education USA Opportunity Funds program is a U.S. initiative that assists scholars who lack the financial resources to cover the upfront costs to apply, with full financial aid from U.S. colleges and universities. Our correspondent, Layo Laride, was at the event in Lagos and now reports.
It's a reception and graduation ceremony to honor program scholars of the U.S. Consulate Education's USA Opportunity Funds program at the U.S. Consular General's home in Lagos.
My name is Chinanya Wadleke.
The recipients are 33 in number, 23 men and 10 women in the program, here with their family members to celebrate their success at gaining U.S. scholarships. The host, U.S. Consul General Will Stevens, commending the scholars, urged them to return to Nigeria after their programs to apply knowledge acquired there.
You are ambassadors of Nigeria. You are the best and the brightest, and when you come back from Nigeria, you are bringing deep connections to U.S. academia, U.S. businesses and companies. Many of you will stay and work for a year doing your OFP. You will come back if you're doing your PhD, and others, you'll have connections to research and funding and fundraising, and you will come back and you will support Nigeria's universities, Nigeria's entrepreneurship. You'll bring investment back. You are driving economic growth in this country.
Thereafter, scholars were presented with their certificates.
Salimat Okpeyemi Shofela.
The scholars and parents share their journey to success and gratitude to the organizers of the program.
Of all the scholarship I got this year was over $300,000 US. I just want to say nothing is unachievable. Just pray and look in the right direction. To be honest, I feel like information is the key.
I'm really grateful to God for this opportunity. I'm grateful to Education USA.
I grew up in a phase where females are not really that present in the tech world, and I realized that females can actually contribute to development of our country, to technology, and can help even in our communities.
The students have also received their flight tickets, visas and travel allowance, and are all due to resume in August across several states in the United States.
And the reason we do this is because we know that higher education is not accessible to everyone. Some people have the finances to be able to afford it, but most people don't. So we are trying to make sure it's inclusive and it's accessible to as many students as possible, especially those who are brilliant but lack the financial resources to apply to study in the United States. Every year, we open the program around the month of March, and it will be open next year. We have a website, opportunityfundsnigeria.org. We encourage anyone who's interested right now to go check out the website.
Through the Opportunity Funds program, these students now have admission and full scholarships to cover their bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degrees in top U.S. universities and colleges, 10 of them undergraduate and 23 graduate programs. Layo Olarinde, Channels Television News.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is in the UK, where he was welcomed by British Prime Minister Keir Starmer at number 10 Downing Street. This morning, President Zelensky becomes the first world leader to visit the newly elected British Prime Minister. Prime Minister Starmer expressed the UK's continued support despite the change in government, whilst Mr. Zelensky thanked his UK counterpart for the invitation.
Let me welcome you here to Downing Street. It is very good. You are my first leader to come and visit. This is the 2-week anniversary of forming a government, so I'm very, very pleased to be able to welcome you here to reiterate what I said in Kyiv a year and a half ago now when I came to see you, which is that the support of the UK government does not change because we've had an election.
Thanks so much, dear Prime Minister. Thank you for the invitation. Privilege for me to be here, the first your guest, and thanks that the UK, together with us, with Ukrainian people, from the very beginning of this war.
And while addressing the UK cabinet, President Zelensky told the British Prime Minister and his cabinet that long-range missile capability is key to his country's efforts in the war with Russia. Mr. Zelensky becomes the first foreign leader to address the UK's cabinet in person since US President Bill Clinton in 1997. A day after hosting a forum of European leaders in Blenheim Palace, Mr. Starmer pressed on with his bid to raise Britain's role in international affairs by inviting Ukrainian leader to address his cabinet.
And I know I speak for every person in this room, the whole government, in saying you have our unshakable support. As I told you last week in Washington at the NATO Council and yesterday at the EPC, we will stand with you and the people of Ukraine for as long as it may take. The change of government does not change our position at all. We supported the previous government. The current opposition supports this government. The only winners, if there's political divide here, are Putin, and we're not going to let that happen. We will double down on our support, and we discussed this morning the further support that we could.
We must deprive Putin of money and capability to produce more weapons, and for his disregard of human life, he must pay with his losses and his defeat. How can we ensure this? Right now we are missing the main answer to this question, and that is our long-range capability. By defending Ukraine against the Russian advance on Kharkiv in May, June, we have proven that we can stop any Russian attempt to expand the war. I appreciate your task to make Britain and the whole of Europe more safe and secure. I hope you'll succeed. And our bilateral security agreement with Britain was the first and in many ways exemplary for other agreements. We in Ukraine are extremely grateful for such leadership, and I hope we can achieve the main goals of our agreement during the years your government is in office.
Meanwhile, in Ukraine, a handful of startups are developing artificial intelligence systems to help fly a vast fleet of drones, taking warfare into uncharted territory as combatants race to gain a technological edge in battle. Ukraine hopes a rollout of AI-enabled drones across the front line will help it overcome increasing signal jamming by the Russians, as well as enable unmanned aerial vehicles to work in larger groups. AI drone development in Ukraine is broadly split between visual systems helping identify targets and fly drones into them, terrain mapping for navigation, and more complex programs enabling UAVs to operate in interconnected swarms. One company working on this is Swarmer, which is developing software that links drones in a network.
But we consider swarming as a capability for group to be coordinated, to instantly react and adopt to the changes, to changes in tasks, to changes in situation, to changes in what they perceive in terms of their some kind of robot perception, and act accordingly. It can be done by humans, by human pilots, for the limited set of the drones in swarm. But when you try to scale it up, it just doesn't work, because for a swarm of 10, 20 drones or robots, it's virtually impossible for humans to manage that. This technology on the battlefield requires human pilots to be connected to drones. With jamming, it's virtually impossible, especially for the group of drones, because it's a really complicated task. But the coordination between the communication between drones, being disconnected from humans, is way easier to be achieved.
In the meantime, Russia says attempts to involve it in a second peace summit on Ukraine are ultimatums which Moscow would not accept. According to Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, the event is based on what she calls Mr. Zelensky's formula, and that's unacceptable. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday he aimed to have a plan ready in November to enable Kyiv hold a second international peace summit, and he said representatives of Russia should attend. Delegations from 92 countries took part in the first summit in Switzerland last month. Russia was not invited and dismissed the event as a waste of time. Away from that, Canada is making history, appointing its first female to lead the country's armed forces. General Jenny Carignan took over as Canada's Chief of Defense Staff on Thursday in a ceremony that made her the first woman to command the armed forces. Trained as a military engineer, General Carignan has commanded troops in Afghanistan, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Iraq and Syria during her 35 years in the Canadian Army. She takes over from General Wayne Eyre, who served as the top military commander since 2021 at a time when Canada is aiming to increase defense spending and modernize its armed forces. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who had pursued policies designed to boost gender equality since taking office in 2015, called her a role model for all Canadians and for the world.
The Right Honourable Justin Trudeau will now present his remarks.
Bonjour tout le monde. There's another one too, you might want to hold for that. And now you are the very first woman to ever become Chief of the Defense Staff, the very first in the G7 and in the G20. You are a role model for all Canadians and for the world. Canada is now among the top 5 NATO allies when it comes to absolute spending increase on defense. By the end of this decade, we're on track to almost triple our defense budget. General Eyre has played a central role in our recent efforts to modernize and strengthen our military. By increasing our defense spending to 2% of GDP by 2032, we're building a stronger, more capable, more resilient Canadian armed forces that can protect our sovereignty and that of our allies.
Your Excellency, our Commander-in-Chief, I intend to carry out these duties with fortitude and unwavering commitment, but also flexibility and the curiosity to continue listening and learning from those who have committed their service to the defense of Canadians and those outside of our organization who share our commitment to a strong and secure Canada. I thank you for your trust and look forward to what the future brings. Bravo Zulu, let's get back to work. Miigwech, thank you, merci.
And finally, Europeans are making good use of the heat wave taking over the continent. An enterprising local in Krasnodar, southern Russia, was seen using the scorching weather to save energy and fry eggs using just the heat from the sun on his balcony. He's seen cracking an egg into the pan after heating the oil in the sun before successfully frying it. According to the Russian Hydrometeorological Center, the heat wave in the region is expected to last from July 16 to 19, with temperatures rising to 41 degrees Celsius. The fierce heat wave continues to roll across southern and central Europe, bringing temperatures of up to 44 Celsius to parts of Spain, sparking forest fires in Greece and Croatia, and prompting governments to urge people to take special care as the mercury rises. And dinner is served. Well, that's it on The World Today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.